Hello，你好，Welcome back，欢迎回来to Wisdom Wednesday with Johnny Tiger on June 7th, 2023. So I'm sure some of you remember that a while ago I did an episode on one of the most messed up thing that I did this year so far was that I had to ride in a hearse. Um, and On that day, I was actually thinking about doing an episode talking about some of the lesser known traditions and observance with regarding to Chinese funeral. Some of you may already know this if you are from the Chinese culture or if you've been to a few Chinese funerals. But those of you who haven't been to a Chinese funeral, and if you are not from the culture, then this is going to be quite a treat for you because there are some interesting little factoids that should be quite an eye opener for you guys. But before I go into this a little bit creepy and disturbing and depressing, sad episode of talking about Chinese funeral, I want to give a quick shout out to this nice little eBay Canada store that I've recently dealt with, and I don't get impressed by eBay store very much. I just like not a big fan of eBay in general, but this store and the kind people, I think it's maybe one person that owns it. It's owned by a very nice, kind local lady here in Vancouver area. Very, very much a pleasure to deal with her and her store. So if you are in the market for birthday gifts or wedding gifts or just want to buy something cool and retro and vintage or antique or quirky for your friends and family, hit up this eBay store. I'm going to leave the link and a blurb from the store's own website in the video description today. So if you want to check it out, all you have to do is go to the video description and click on the link, and it will take you right there. And I hope you happy hunting. Now, before we get into the little facts and do's and don'ts and little interesting little ceremonies regarding the Chinese funeral, um, the Mandarin word today is 葬礼. 葬礼, Jonle. 葬 means funeral, burial. Li means ceremony. So a lot of different kind of ceremony like wedding and funeral and stuff like that. They have a word li at the end. That li means ceremony, something official. Interestingly enough, when you give someone a present, that thing it goes 礼物. Again, li le and then wu, wu, 礼物. Again, li means ceremonial, official, offering, and wu means item, object. So, gift and present in Chinese culture have quite a significant associated with them because uh, they are quite official sounding and quite ceremonial sounding. Well, since we are talking about 葬礼, which is funeral, I might as well tell you how to say wedding. Well, I know the two shouldn't be put together, but hey, they are almost the same. So if you know how to say one, it shouldn't be very hard to learn the other one. So 葬礼 is funeral. 婚礼, Hun, 婚礼 is wedding. The time is now 8 p.m. Thank you. First, let's talk about the Tomb Sweeping Festival. We have touched upon this multiple times in past episodes, so we won't linger too much on this one. Tomb Sweeping Festival in Mandarin is called Qingmingjie, Chingming, and then Jie, Jia. Jie means holiday, special day. So, depending on what special holiday we're talking about, usually a holiday in Mandarin would end with the word 节, like 圣诞节 is Christmas, 清明节 is Two Sweeping Day, 端午节 is Dragon Boat Day, and 中秋节 is a moon festival, and so on and so on. So all the special day would usually end with the word 节, Jia. So it's a good one to keep in your mind because it will pop up quite often. So during Qingmingjie, Tomb Sweeping Day, first of all, where is it or when is it? Qingmingjie typically falls on April 4th or April 5th of our calendar, the Gregorian calendar. In the lunar calendar, it's typically the 15th day after spring equinox. So that can kind of vary a little bit from year to year. But typically speaking, it almost always fall on our April 4th or April 5th. What do you do on Tomb Sweeping Day? Well, obviously, as the name implies, you would go to the gravesite of your ancestors and uh, pull off the weeds and put fresh flowers by the tombstones and make sure everything is nice and tidy. But it's way more than that. Tomb Sweeping Day is also a day when families have a picnic at the gravesite, spending some time remembering the deceased and spending some time with each other. It is a good time to remind each other, hey, the fact that we can sit here eating, having a picnic, we should cherish this moment because our ancestors no longer here with us. People on tomb sweeping days also tend to use that day to go hiking because it's springtime, so it's a good time to go out there, get into nature and get some fresh air, some sun, and also people tend to bring a lot of food, fruit, and flowers to use as offerings at the gravesite, so the ancestor would bless them for the rest of the year. Another very important common thing for people to do is to fly kites. Uh, During Qingmingjie, during Tomb Sweeping Day, is when you are going to see all kind of really, really cool kites. And it is said that flying a kite on this day, the kite symbolizes all the bad luck, bad omen, all the misfortunes that you have. And by letting the kite go into the sky and then let it fly away, it is a symbol of letting go of all your troubles. Some people will also write little notes and messages on the kite and then let the kite fly away, hoping that their ancestors will be able to read it in that other world. Now here is an old tradition regarding funerals that I personally think it's a good thing that we no longer observe that today, but it is an interesting one. Throughout Chinese history for thousands of years, it was very much customary for people to go back to live by the gravesite of whoever that just passed away. Uh, this is called 守孝. 守孝 means to observe the filial piety. So this is usually done if it's your parents that passed away. You know, other people usually don't count. So let's say if your mom or your dad passed away, it didn't matter if you were a lowly magistrate of a town or if you were one of the mightiest minister or generals for the emperor. It didn't matter. It didn't matter what kind of rank you had, what kind of station you had. The moment you get that letter from your home that said your mom passed away or your dad passed away, you have to ask the emperor to let you go. Like you literally put down whatever prestige, title, job you have. Nothing is more important than going back and pay your respect by staying the required amount of time by the gravesite of your parents. So a lot of time people would end up build a little shack or cabin and then they live by the grave for the required amount of time, which was customarily 3 years. Uh, in there were some dynasties where this got shrunken down to 9 months, but still, that's a long time away from your duty, away from your post. And here is the kicker. After you are done doing this, there's no guarantee that you'll get your job back. Because obviously, if you were some kind of like a high ranking minister, like say if you were the minister of finance, it's quite likely the empire couldn't operate without you. So if you have to take 3 years off to go social, to go pay respect by the gravesite of your parents, yeah, so most likely the emperor would just put someone in your place, and too bad, you're not going to get your job back. The only time when someone could be exempt from this ceremony would be if the emperor himself order you to stay. Right? The emperor had the power to order you to skip this tradition, but the emperor usually would, even for the emperor, they need really valid excuse, really valid reason. So, for example, let's say you're a high-ranking general and you lead the imperial army, and your emperor just happened to be at war with the neighboring kingdom, then your emperor can use that as a valid reason that this is a state of emergency. We are at war. So he can order you to not have to uh, retire early, pretty much. Um, other than that, if you try to skip this yourself, it could be very, very serious. Like if your colleagues or if other people find out that your mom or your dad passed away, but you did not go back, you did not resign from your post to go observe this tradition, they can report you to the emperor, and if the emperor wanted to, this was uh, penalty. This was a crime punishable by death because it shows that you are not a good person. You have sinned against your parents. You have broken the one of the most sacred law. So uh, it's something that a lot of people really have to be careful of. The moment that you hear that your parent passed away, off you go. You don't want to mess around with it. Um, this obviously, like I said, it's a good thing that we don't do this anymore today. Can you imagine that you finally got a good job and then you have to take 3 years off to go live in a cabin by the gravesite and you lose your job? And no kidding, a lot of people got screwed by this in the old days. A lot of people. Uh, we often hear sometimes it would take someone 9 years, 10 years, 15 years to finally pass the imperial scholar exam and then get selected for a very prestigious post, only to suddenly have their parent passed away 2 months later. Yeah, can you imagine? That would totally drive me nuts. Now, while the ceremonies and traditions we have observed today during Chinese funerals are no longer quite as extreme of that. Some of them are still quite extreme, so much so that it can be a little bit disturbing for people. Uh, Perhaps the most disturbing one that even my mom had to go through when my grandparent passed away is that uh, it's customary for people to have the viewing of the deceased person, have the body in the casket displayed in the living room or front room of their house. Now, if you don't have a big enough house or if you live in an apartment building, obviously that's not going to fly. So in those cases, you actually have to shell out the money to have this done at a funeral home. Uh, but basically, no matter where you do this, the body have to be on display for 7 days and 7 nights. And the entire time this is going on, what some member of the family have to watch and guard over the body. So it's not like you leave it there and then you will go home and eat and bathe and shower and watch TV. No, everybody in the family have to take shifts and sit there with the body and the casket. This tradition is a very, very old one that is still observed today. The reason being, in the old days, they realized that sometimes people might not have been really dead. Sometimes people might have just passed out or been in a coma. And in the old days, they didn't really have some equipment, scientific equipment to really say for sure if the person's dead for good. And it wasn't that uncommon that someone was said to be dead, but the person was just in a deep coma or something like that, and then the person ended up waking up 5 days later. So uh, from thousands of years ago, they figured out, well, you kind of want to sit there with the body and make sure that the person that if they come back to life, you are there with for them, and you want to leave the body there long enough for it to kind of start decaying, because once it start decaying, and you know it's the person's dead. Okay, the body is like, yeah, it's putrefying or whatever. The person, and so you can imagine this is very, very unpleasant. Obviously, nowadays they have all kinds of ways of preserving the body, because nowadays we have equipment that tell us the person is really dead. Uh, so we don't really need to worry about them coming back to life 3 or 4 days later. But people still hold on to this old tradition. It is also said that after a person passed away, the deceased spirit uh, will get a holiday, get a day off from the underworld on the seventh day of their passing. Okay, so it's said that after you die, your spirit go to the underworld and then you go through the whole shebang of signing paperwork, sit through judgment, being told what if you were naughty or nice, where you're going to go, all that bureaucratic stuff. And then on the seventh day of your passing, your spirit is allowed to go home one final time. So you can see your descendants, see your friends and families, see if they really have obeyed your will, if your favorite dining table is still there, and give you a chance to have some closure to see your family and friends one last time. So Chinese people really believe in that. So that's another reason why they want to keep the body for 7 days. So when the spirit is coming home, the spirit has sort of a beacon to allow them to uh, come back to the right place, to the right house, to see their beloved people, family members, one last time. Now, if you think that was it, after the seventh day, you bury the body and that you were done, you're mistaken. The actual mourning period after, especially the passing of a parent or elder in the family, uh, is 49 days. Okay, so you mourn for 49 days. What do you do during the mourning period? Well, you have to continue to wear white. You have to continue. Yes, that's another thing that a lot of people don't know. Is in Chinese funeral, during Chinese funeral and mourning period, we don't wear black, we wear white because white in this case symbolizes the purity and the passing on of the person, leaving behind all the bad stuff, all the troubles. Now they are pure. They can go into their next life pure of heart, and hopefully uh, they are rid of all the things, all the bad stuff that plagued them in this life, such as disease and pains and PTSDs and disabilities and all that stuff. So wearing white is a symbol of purity and respect in this case. So, yes, your mourning period is 49 days from the day the person died. You have to mourn for 49 days. So you got to wear white for 49 days. No other color. No dressing up in bright, happy color. That's no. No going to parties for 49 days. Some people will even go as far as not bathing or shower for 49 days, but those are rare, more rare nowadays. But yeah, you have to refrain from laughter. You have to refrain from cheer. No karaoke. No getting married. No sex. Uh, none of that. None of that happy stuff. Okay, so no happy stuff. You just have to spend 49 days mourning, grieving, talking about the person, offering prayers, and making food and fruit and flower offerings, say more prayers, and think about the person and cry. You got to cry a lot. I'm not even talking about like you'll cry because you're grieving. I'm sure like some people, a lot of people really are, but like customarily you're supposed to cry. If you don't show adequate sadness during this period, it can be something that your family member will hit you over the head with later in life. I know because I was 5 years old when my grandmother passed away, and because I didn't know her very well, and I was too young to really understand death. I didn't cry, and even to this day, a lot of my family members still use that against me. So it is very very important to show adequate amount of sadness and grief and being all torn up inside and all that stuff for 49 days, which is the prescribed mourning period. Why 49 days? Well, that's a good question. The 49 days is what is traditionally agreed upon by Buddhist priests and Taoist priests and every priest in Chinese culture. That's how long it typically takes for the spirit to get processed. So if you think of reincarnation as immigration, uh, like when you want to apply to go to another country, you got to wait. You don't just get to go right away. There's usually a period where you got to get things ready and wait for answers, wait for more application forms and passport and all that stuff. Well, think of reincarnation as the same way. When you die, you don't get processed right away. You got to go through a long processing period where your spirit is just kind of hanging around, wandering around aimlessly, waiting to hear where you're going to go. So it was said by the priest that the standard processing time is about 49 days. So this is why people mourn for 49 days. It's not that after 49 days you're not sad anymore. It's not that you really are sad for 49 days. Um, this is done. So every day you will be praying to the person and talking to the deceased and thinking about them. So while their spirit is waiting to be processed, they won't feel abandoned and angry and lonely and lost and stuff like that. So I already mentioned that people wear white during mourning period and Chinese funeral. Now let's look at some of the other interesting little facts about the funeral itself. One of the things that people will do for Chinese funeral, especially if you have the money to spend, if you are rich enough to do this, is you got to hire a priest to come and say the proper prayer for the dead, so the spirit would be treated better in the afterlife. These prayers have usually is appreciated by both Taoist and Buddhist monks. Sometimes people will even hire a Christian uh, priest to do it. So now you may say, well, that's really wacky. Why would you have multiple religion? Well, because Chinese people were wise enough to realize that no one really know for sure. Right? You say Buddhist, it's how it is, and he says Taoism is the way to go. Someone else say Christian is the only religion, but who really know for sure? Well, Chinese people were wise enough to realize that no one really know. So just to make sure that our ancestor spirit, the spirit of the deceased, is properly taken care of, we cover all the angles. So if you have the money, it is customary to just try to get as many different religions involved in the funeral as you can. Now, in addition to the prayers, there's also a lot of food, a lot of drinks. But here's the thing: Chinese funerals are very different in that it's not a celebration of life. You don't show up and start telling jokes. You don't start talking about funny moments of the deceased. That's really disrespectful. You don't laugh or be friendly. Everybody have to look as sad as they can. Even if you are not sad, you have to look sad. Okay, so it's very, very important to look sad during a Chinese funeral. So if you've never been to a Chinese funeral and then you get invited to one, make sure you don't show up and start smiling at people. That's going to offend them to no end. You're supposed to cry. You're supposed to look sad. If you can't make yourself cry, then at least keep your head down and look like you're really broken up inside, even while you're enjoying the food and drinks. Another interesting thing that people do during Chinese funeral is burning the paper replicas, the paper maches, uh, for as offerings for the deceased. Now, some people say, what is that about? Well, it is this, as far as I know, came from Taoism, and it has been a tradition for thousands of years. Uh, it is said that if you want your ancestor, if you want the person to have what they like in the afterlife, you need to send it to them. You need to mail it to them because when they show up on that side, they're going to be completely without anything. They just have the funeral clothes, whatever clothes they are buried in. That's all they have. Uh, it doesn't matter if you put like $1 million in their coffin. They can't take that with them. So to make sure that your favorite uncle is not going to show up in the underworld totally broke, you got to send them the goods, the money, the television, their favorite TV, their favorite sofa, their favorite dogs, the horses. But obviously you can't really send those things through. So the priest had told people for many hundreds, maybe thousands of years that if they make a replica, let's say your uncle have a favorite dog. Well, obviously we don't want to kill the dog. So what we want to do is we get a priest to build a paper dog, a dog made out of paper mache, and it can't be just any paper. Okay, this has to be done by a holy person on a specialized paper, and the ink used have to be a specialized ink, only used by the holy people. So this has to be blessed. It can't you can't just do this at home. Um, so if you want them a TV, if you want your ancestor to have a TV, you go to the holy person and say, I want to buy a TV for my ancestor. And then they'll say, okay, well, come to the back room. And then they have a paper mache TV, all kind of inches and different types, different models. Uh, they try to make them as realistic as they can be, they can look. And when you throw these in the fire and burn them to ashes, it is said that your ancestors will receive the real stuff on the other side. Sound preposterous, sound ridiculous, I know, but this is such a big deal that people still do this today. It's really just for a peace of mind, and because you really don't want your favorite uncle or auntie to end up uh, broke on the other side, right? So if you can spend a couple $100 to get them some paper-made houses, a paper-made house-made, and paper-made credit card, something like that, so they at least they'll have something uh, they can uh, own in the afterlife. That is a way for people to cope with their grief as well. Obviously, there's many more different customs and ceremonies and traditions for funerals, especially considering that every province, every township, every village might have their own little twist on this um, custom, so there's no way for us to cover them all today. But I hope that what we've talked about so far have given you a glimpse into the very interesting and archaic system of Chinese funeral. And oh yeah, I almost forgot. Another very interesting one is Chinese people actually have a career, a profession called professional mourner. No kidding. When my grandparents passed away, to make sure that the funeral looked well attended, uh, we, well, not me, but my family, spent 20, $30,000 hiring five or 600 professional mourners to come pay respect and stand in the crowd and to cry and look sad. Again, sound totally ridiculous, but hey, it makes the family look bad if your uncle passes away and then there's only two people at the funeral, right? So, in these kind of situations where there's not enough people attending the funeral, then people will go out there and hire professional mourners. And these professional mourners sometimes they're even better than the real stuff, like because these are almost like actors and actresses. They can cry on the drop of a dime. They look really sad when they want to look sad, and they really look like they belong there at the funeral. So with that, we come to the end of this rather wacky and somewhat depressing episode. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. And don't forget, if you want to get some gift for your friends and families for birthday or special occasions, check out the eBay store. That I will leave the link in the description of the video today. For now, 谢谢 and 再见。